On today's show, Darrell and I are talking about how we develop the strategic advantage mindset here at Athletic Mission in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Hey guys, welcome back to Strategic Baseball Podcast. Today, Darrell and I are going to talk about how we develop the strategic advantage mindset. Last episode, we talked about how we teach the mental game, and today we're going to talk about how we teach the strategic advantage mindset. So Geoff and Darrell here, and we help baseball players get to the next level with their strategic advantage so that they can play with supreme confidence against the best players at any level. In every episode, we promise to deliver value on the strategic side of player development to help your players compete with players just as good, if not better than them. Remember, Darrell, the pitching strategist. I am a hitting strategist, and this is Strategic Baseball Podcast. If you are interested in joining our circle, head over to strategic-baseball.com and submit your email to always get a reminder each time we release a new episode. If you are a player, parent, or coach who is interested in learning more about how the strategic advantage baseball process works for you in your unique situation, email me at jeff@athletic-mission.com or daryl@dc@startpitching.com, which you can find in the show notes. We would love to arrange a time to speak with you and see how we can help. All right, Daryl, I'm going to let you take it away. We're talking about how we develop a strategic advantage mindset here at Athletic Mission Baseball Academy in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yeah, and I'm going to piggyback a little bit off the last show because we want to kind of give a compare and contrast view of what we defined as the mental side of baseball at Athletic Mission and how we try to break it down and integrate it into our training programs here. And then at the same time, you know, as we talked about in the last show a little bit, when we talked the two pieces of baseball development for us is the you piece and then the opponent piece. And that's what we're going to break down today is strategy. And when we talk about strategy, this is a huge piece that I think there's almost a misconception in the baseball world because we got all the data, all the analytics, all this information, especially at the higher levels, man. Colleges and, you know, that's got the money to get the stats and resources to use them. Then, and the pro level especially, the information that we can get about what this pitcher's done or what this hitter's done and how would we pitch to them and how we create a game plan. I think we look at it almost from like this video game mindset that it's just data. It's just there that if A happens, then do this. If B happens, then do this. But as you and I know, baseball is not played that way. It's played in real time against a real opponent, and we play it live, man. So we got to make adjustments. We got to be able to see the game from that analytical point of view. Sometimes we got to be able to see it. We want to use data to give us some information and give us an idea to prove out patterns, habits, and tendencies, to kind of prove out different scenarios and situations and counts that kind of what are they doing inside of that. But when we're talking about player development and how do we help them create this strategic advantage mindset, then we got to tie together like what we talked about the last show, the you piece of it, your athletic ability, your mastered baseball skill set, or your mastered pitches as a pitcher. And then we got to change and go, not just jump straight to game day. We got to have a strategy. And I think this is the piece that a lot of coaches skip or a lot of players skip because they just think that I have this really, really good, I throw 95 miles an hour, or I got a nasty curveball, or I got fill in the blank tools and talents and abilities, but they don't have a plan to use those tools, talents, and abilities against a specific opponent and then breaking it down versus a specific hitter. And so today, when we talk about strategic advantage mindset, we talk about three pieces that we work on with our guys. And when we break down how do we create a strategy, a game day strategy, we first start with what does that team know about you as a pitcher? So I'm going to use a pitcher example. So if I'm pitching, what does that team know about me? Because for me to understand how they're probably game planning, I got to understand, what do I do? What is my patterns, habits, and tendencies? What are the nuances? What are the things in certain situations and counts that I do? because whether it's a coach calling your pitches, which we'll talk about a different show, or whether it's you and the catcher collaborating about what pitch to throw, man, we're all humans are patterns, habits, and tendencies, man. We all got nuances and things that we do that if we sit here and study guys long enough and we watch them in enough situations and counts, man, we're going to see that. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't change them, and that don't mean that it's that way every time. But as you know, in baseball, man, stats in them are based on percentages. It's based on, what are the odds? What is going to happen in this situation and count? And what's the odds of him throwing this pitch by this movement pattern with this velocity to this location? And that's how baseball is played. But if we don't develop players to have that strategic thinking mindset, to take their baseball skills of what they can do, take their mastered pitches, and be able to go create a strategy against the hitter. That don't mean that it won't change in real time. That don't mean that the umpire might not miss a call or that the hitter might change and make an adjustment. But what it does is it gives us this basis, this foundation to start game planning with. And that's the difference that we really want these guys to focus on, is that, hey, there's the you part. That's the mental side, the physical side. That's your capability. That's kind of your unique baseball skill set. Now, how do we take your unique baseball skill set and create a strategy versus the Houston Astros today, or versus the Dodgers today, or versus, the local high school team, or, the perfect game tournament or PBR tournament you're playing in, whatever it is, within that context, you should be able to create at least this foundational, fundamental game plan. And I think a lot of players skip that, and they just jump into either the coach is calling every pitch. And a lot of times, Geoff, you and I have talked about this 100 times. Most of the time when I go watch teams, I'll ask them if it's one of our guys pitching, they'll tell me the coach calls every pitch. Usually about the, fourth or fifth hitter into the game, man, I can tell what that coach is going to call 85, 90% of the time.
Yep.
Because the coaches are patterns, habits, and tendencies too. This is not rocket science, but the reality of it is we play in real time, man. What might have worked for that pitcher 2 days ago or 2 games ago, it might not be working today in this environment. It might not be working with this umpire calling the game. It might not be working with, the discipline that these hitters are showing at the plate. All the different nuances and pieces that go into what would make me change my strategy? What would make me change the way I'm going to pitch against this guy? And I think we just kind of give it this generic kind of idealism. And it really isn't, man. It's got to be super specific to that individual pitcher about what's working that day, and then the reality of what's going on in the game. Whether the umpire's got a big strike zone, whether, what the other team's philosophy is. And so I think when we start stacking that piece into it, what we call the me, them, and him piece, the me is really you, like we just talked about. Do you know what your patterns, habits, and tendencies are? Then the them piece is your opponent, your coach, the team that you're facing, that coach's philosophy. Does he have a hitting philosophy? Does he have a game philosophy to where they take a lot of pitches early the first time through the order, or they don't swing at the first pitch because they always try to run up the pitch count on the starting pitcher, and they want to see as many pitches that first time through the order as they can. Every coach has got their own philosophy on how they want to attack different pitchers and how they want to attack the opponent they're playing that day, or whether they think it's going to be a low scoring game and that they're going to have to scrap for every run they get early, or whether they think, this is going to be a high-scoring game, so, man, we can go ahead and be a little more aggressive. All of that plays into it. And so when we see that piece of it, then that gives you as a player and a coach the ability to kind of look at that coach's philosophy, and then how do I want to approach that coach? And then the last piece was we talk about the him. That is the individual hitter. What does that hitter know about me? What is that coach's philosophy? And then what is that individual hitter's patterns, habits, and tendencies? What kind of cues and clues is he giving me in real time to let me know whether he's making adjustments, whether he's got a pretty good idea, he's on time with my pitches, and whether I need to make that adjustment. Do I need to change lanes and planes with my pitches? Do I need to move this pitch in the zone to out or out the zone to in and try to get that freeze or try to get that bad swing and miss? See, all of those little pieces go into that hitter's patterns, habits, and tendencies. And so again, man, I know this sounds kind of weird or deep, and there ain't many people really talking about it, but this is the reality of where the strategic advantage mindset comes in, that we try to teach these guys, that we teach them that game day is the only thing that matters, man. At the end of the day, it's the only thing that matters. How we execute on game day, that don't mean the outcome is always what we want, but our execution, we should be in control of. And then what we learn from every pitch or from every at bat is what makes us a baseball player. And then how do we actually play the game together as a team is what makes it baseball. And so when we can kind of dissect the game down into those individual levels, that, yeah, we got the team piece that is the game of baseball as a whole. Then we got the little individual things that each player has to do, each individual component of the game. And then we got to dissect that down into strategy. And then we dissect it backwards into what is that? What is your, skill and ability? What could you possibly do? And can you throw that pitch in this situation and count? And that is what kind of builds these baseball players. And again, man, I know that this seems a little weird and sounds a little strange, Geoff, but this is the stuff that we've been doing here, and guys are starting to get it. They're starting to come back in these post-game evaluations, especially this summer, and start breaking hitters down and picking up on coaches and the other teams kind of hitting philosophy. And, man, it's amazing when they see it, because it changes the way these young players look at the game. They look at the game, man. And when we get that kind of breakthrough, man, that's when we see guys really start to develop, really start to grasp the game. And then, as you and I always say, baseball is not boring. Once you have a strategy and you're able to execute a strategy, again, that don't mean you get the outcome you want, right, but it does mean that you have a plan going into it. Once you're able to execute a strategy and go compete against players just as good or better than you, buddy, that's baseball, man. And that's when it becomes fun. And that's when we see these guys really grasp it, man.
Yeah, this is fun, man. And you know what? We hear this all the time with the people that come in, and even when you read, kind of on the internet, the question is always, why do guys struggle taking games? And this is why. And this is what we're talking about here. When we train, this is the you piece that we talk about. And then you show up in a game and you have to face him and them, who are all trying to get you out. So you can see how, why a lot of parents, coaches, and players would think that they have a mental game issue, when really it's just like a lack of having a plan, lack of understanding what they are doing, lack of understanding what adjustment they need to make in real time, in extreme pressure, which causes guys to have anxiety. So that's why we talk about the missing link. We think it's going to be this strategic advantage mindset, developing a strategy based off of what you know about yourself, what you know about the other team, the other coaches, and then what you know about that pitcher individually. This has got to be the focus when we transition into like the in season. So there's the in season, there's preseason, and there's off season, preseason, and in season, all of which has a very different focus. But man, the moment we start playing games, we got to start taking what we do, what we know, what we've mastered, and we got to start preparing for them and him. And this man, most of the time, this is really like it's just a conversation, and it's getting them to think baseball, getting them to think about the best way to prepare, thinking about what adjustment they will make if XYZ happens. One thing that Darrell always liked to talk about, he liked to talk about, thinking of this like a quarterback studying a quarterback. The quarterback, they study film, they go out in the game in real time, and they read the defense, and then he makes the judgment based on what he's seeing. and then what it means for the decision that he's getting ready to make. So it's kind of the same concept. So yeah, dude, so all we're talking about really is going from you to them and preparing for that, especially during the time of the year in which you guys are playing games. We don't need to be focusing on training. We don't need to be focusing on the UP so much when we're in season. In season is when we need to take what we've done, what we've mastered, and start really preparing and start really coming up with a game plan for them and him.
Yeah, and I think what ends up happening is we see the symptoms.
Yeah.
We see the symptoms and they manifest themselves either physically or mentally. We see frustration, we see emotional reactions, we see the things that we try to control. But if we don't ask that next question, why is he reacting that way? You know what I mean? Why is he not seeing that pitch? Why is he not looking for that pitch? See, as coaches, if we'll ask the next question without making it personal, without being emotionally attached to it ourselves, if we'll ask that next question, like, why did we get that result? And start dissecting how we got that numbers and the decision-making process that went into that, we'll change the game for these kids because we see it work. We see it work. But we got to redefine it. We can't keep calling it mental when it's not. It's a lack of strategy, and it's affected me mentally. And so I'm not saying that they're not tied together. Baseball is a game of intellect and physical capability and mental thoughts and processes and strategic and having a strategic advantage and creating a strategy. That's it. All of that encompasses a baseball player and what it takes to go play competitively in a real baseball game. But we also got to understand that if I got a lack of strategy, then it's going to affect me mentally and it's going to affect me eventually physically, because most of the time that's where it manifests itself. My brain slows down, my brain is defensive, and now I don't move the way I normally would. Or maybe my mechanics are changed now because I just don't have that confidence, or I got a little indecision in what I should do right here. So yeah, we can kind of pigeonhole that as a mental problem. But when we kind of dissect it a little deeper and say, hey man, what was you thinking? It's not literally fear thinking. No, what was your decision-making process? And so that's what I try to get coaches to change. Instead of saying, hey, what was you thinking then? Say, hey, man, walk me through your decision-making process. What was you thinking, why that would be the absolute best pitch you could throw in that situation and count? And instead of judging it, help them identify why that might have been a good pitch to throw or why it's not. But see, as coaches, we emotionally react to whatever happened. And so all the time when I hear coaches say, well, you shouldn't have threw that pitch in that situation and count, I said, well, if he'd have struck that kid out with that, would you have told him that when he came off? And they say, I don't know, I doubt it. Then how can you say it when it don't work out? See, the reality of it is for that player in that situation and count, in that point of the game, if he believes that's the best pitch he should throw, more likely that's the best pitch he should throw. Now, whether it turns out to be that or not, but when we're talking about kids taking ownership of their pitches and having conviction when they execute a pitch, it can't be because somebody else thinks it's the best pitch for them to throw, no matter what. If you want to talk about screwing with a kid mentally for real, then have them out there just mindlessly throwing pitches and pretend like they're not emotionally attached to the outcome. Now, if it works out, they don't say nothing. See, it's the opposite of coaches then. See, we got players like that too. You and I talk about it. We got players that don't want to call their own game. They don't want to be strategic thinkers. They just want to go out there and be the video game. They want to be the robot and just have the coach, kind of punch in the right pitch, and hopefully it works out. And if it does, everybody's happy. But at the end of the day, that's not how you're going to be able to compete against elite level players under extreme pressure. And when you start leveling up, especially if you want to play in college or pro ball one day and really be good, then you're going to have to learn how to call your own pitches. You're going to have to learn how to strategize against an opponent. And does that mean it's perfect every time, that it turns out exactly the way we wish it would? No. But what it does mean is that your brain knows that before the competition starts, you got a plan and an idea, and it gives you the ability to go compete against players that are just as good or better than you. And once you do that, then the game of baseball actually happens. Then we get to play. And then that's kind of, the result of what we're looking for. And so, man, I love this conversation. I know we could probably talk about this for 5 hours, but the big takeaway that I want players and coaches and parents to have is understand that there is a physical side of baseball. There is a mental side of baseball, but there's also a strategic side of baseball that without it, that it probably has the biggest impact on the mental and the physical side when it comes to actually playing in a real baseball game. And so we got to help these young players as they're developing mentally and emotionally and physically, and trying to develop their strategic thinking, the way they want to strategize against an opponent. We got to make that all part of the game and make it fun, but also make it a part that they have to have. That when game day starts and when the season starts, that we need to have a strategy, even if it's just simple. That it's got to be a strategy that they can trust and believe in, because if not, man, it's going to manifest and affect them mentally and then physically. And then we end up with the majority of the people that call us or show up at our doors, that are struggling and fighting and then trying to figure out, how do I get out of this crazy slump or funk that I'm in?
Yeah, my takeaway is going to be remembering that strategy based off of the skill set that you've been able to master. And then it's based off trying to figure out what you know about you, what you know about them, and what you know about him.
Right.
And this type of thinking can happen all the time. We ask our guys all the time, hey, how would you approach this guy right here? You see him every day at practice. You have an idea of what he's trying to do and what he does. So what would you do to get him out, or how would you approach him?
Yep.
Or maybe we could look up at the TV and we see Justin Verlander on TV, and we would ask our guys, hey, how would you approach him? What would be your plan based on what you're seeing him doing? And so this type of thinking and curiosity needs to happen more frequently.
Yep.
And, this is how we get to that strategic advantage mindset. And us as coaches can get players there. We can help them get there. For example, like if there's a rain delay, instead of canceling practice or having guys to play on their phone, why not have a strategy session?
Yep.
And now we're getting them to think baseball. What does this guy do that makes you make that decision? And how can we bring awareness to each other on what pitchers and what hitters are picking up, so that we can have awareness, so that we understand what guys are seeing? This is an everyday type of conversation to think baseball, to get to that strategic advantage mindset.
Yeah, man, that's good. Good stuff.
All right, very good. So that's how we teach the strategic advantage mindset process. Please, if you guys are finding any value in these episodes, please leave us an objective review, and then head over to strategic-baseball.com and, submit your email, join our circle, so that we can kind of keep you guys included on everything that we're doing. Thank you all for listening in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.